Awesome. So we're recording now. Again, the plan is that we'll be able to share this and upload it after the fact. So like I said, as you can tell by both the Minnesota Housing crew, and it's great to see so many of you join us this afternoon. We're really excited to be launching this community reviewer application information session. So I'll just be running through just some basic information about what to expect, what to look for, a little bit of background. And then at the end, we'll answer any questions you might have. So again, we're recording the presentation today. It will be available online in the same webpage where this information is available. So I'll provide a really brief overview of Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, a little background about what this community reviewer effort is all about, the role of community reviewers, the application process, how we'll select community reviewers, what the participation requirements are, and then I'll talk a little bit about the grant that's going to be scored. It's called the 2022 Capacity Building RFP. So I always think it's important when we're talking about Minnesota housing that we're talking about why, our vision, our values, and why we're here today. So we really see housing as the foundation for success, and we recognize how important collaboration is and relationships with individuals, communities, and partners to create, preserve, and finance housing that is affordable. And we know when we can see and feel this, right, that housing impacts Minnesotans of all backgrounds in all corners of the state, and that it touches all areas of life, education, health, jobs, and more, right? If housing is a challenge, oftentimes you'll find all those other parts of life are a challenge. And so that's why we're really dedicated to working with communities to support people to have housing stability. And so I wanted to talk about just Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. So even though housing is in our name, there's a certain slice of housing that we touch. So homelessness prevention, supportive housing. So if people need services to stay in their housing, rental housing, homeownership, and manufactured housing. Things like shelter services or legal services are not within Minnesota housing. So I always like to make sure people understand kind of how we fit. And so now I just wanted to talk a bit about the application itself. So hopefully you saw it's due Wednesday, July 13th at 2 p.m. And some background. So big picture, Minnesota Housing and us as individual staff are really dedicated to increasing community participation in how we make decisions. And we want to do that in a really comprehensive way. There's a state office of grants management. They set all the rules about how we should be doing grant making, and they've encouraged community reviewers whenever possible. We have in the past had different Minnesota housing teams that have included community perspectives, often in the form of community organizations, as we've selected grants. And another huge value is that we compensate community reviewers when they're sharing their time and their expertise. So it was important to us that we didn't launch this effort until we figured out a way to be able to compensate our community colleagues for their time and expertise in this process. And then I wanted to talk about the fact that this is a pilot. So we're really testing out what it looks like to have this organized way of inviting community members to be part of the grant making. So we spent a year researching and developing this pilot or this test, and we really want to make a whole framework for how we do grant making in a way that values, listens to, and acts on the input of community. As I mentioned before, some of the teams at Minnesota Housing have invited community members, but this is really the first time we'll contract with and pay community members to serve as community reviewers. And really that's about scoring applications and participating in the grantee selection processes. We know this is going to be a learning process. We've tried our best to think of all the different ways we can make it a success, but we'll really be looking at those selected community reviewers to help us learn along the way. And we'll incorporate what we learn as we improve so that we can continue to improve this process. And I know this is really small, bear with me while I try to zoom in. That made it worse, sorry everybody. Okay, so I just wanted to break down the process for awarding grant funds. So honestly, when I first heard the word RFP or request for proposals, it was very mysterious to me. Like, what is this? What does it mean? And so I thought it'd be helpful to spend a little time to explain what it is, because it is a really important way for how we do this work at Minnesota Housing. So it starts by having funds, having money available. So we receive money from the state of Minnesota to help activities and programs. And then we define the priorities for how we're going to use this money. And so again, often we do this by listening to what communities have been telling us. And we make an open invitation. So we announce it widely that organizations can submit an application, answer questions, and provide documents to compete for these resources. So that's what a request for proposal is. Oftentimes we might call it an RFP. So in order to have a really competitive open process, we need to have a way that we're scoring and ranking applications. So we create a team of state employees and community members that score the applications and review these grants. We help them get ready by providing trainings about the program and priorities, the steps in the process, and how to score. And really want to emphasize that we are here to answer questions throughout the process. So once we've done that, we assign the applications for review. We strongly consider the reviewer recommendations to arrive at the final list of grantees. And I should note, this is a picture, so if you need an accessible version, this link will take you to a reader-friendly version online. So now I wanted to talk more specifically about what the grant reviewer does. And there'll be a little bit of overlap, but just to be clear, the grant reviewer scores applications. And again, there's a score guide. It's kind of like, scoring a test, right? So with each application question, there's a, strong, medium, low type of score. And then we add up the score to see who are the strongest applicants. Of those applicants, and this is pretty unique to the capacity building grants and just a few other grants at the agency, that we do have an interview process. So we identify the strongest applicants to be invited to an interview. We interview the applicants, and again, we have to score the interview. We evaluate the finalists, so we look at their application score, their interview score, and then from there we arrive at a final list of applicants to fund. So that's kind of big picture, the process and how this works. Again, if you're selected as a community reviewer, we'll make sure to break this down in a lot more detail and hopefully set it up in a way that helps you move through the process. So next, I wanted to talk through the community reviewer roles and responsibilities. So a one-time payment of $500 will be made after all of the following on the screen here are complete. So participating in 2 required meetings, one is a community reviewer orientation. The second one is a grant reviewer training meeting. So the orientation really breaks down kind of like what I did already, but in a lot more detail. So how does this process work? How can we set you up for success? What are the different, things to be thinking about throughout the process? And then the grant reviewer training is really specific to the grant itself, to the scoring guide and those types of things. The second requirement is reviewing and scoring 6 to 8 applications. So this grant closes on July 25th, so we're not sure how many applications we'll receive. We estimate it'll take 8 to 10 hours over a 3-week period. That's kind of on the high end, but it's good the first time you're reviewing a grant to kind of give a buffer for that. The next requirement is participating in the interview session. So there'll be about a 2 to 3 hour time block that we're asking community reviewers to sign up for to score the interviews. We may need to assign those interview blocks depending on how many applications we have and to make sure we have enough interviewers per session. And then there's 2 selection meetings. So the first step is a longer meeting, about 4 to 5 hours, where the interview finalists are selected. And then the final meeting is about 2 to 3 hours to identify the recommended grantees. So again, some of these timings are subject to change depending on how many applications we receive. And then finally, we ask that community reviewers provide feedback of their experience to Minnesota Housing Grant Program and evaluation staff. So those of us that introduced ourselves on the call, we will build this out a little bit more, but we don't anticipate this being a very significant time commitment, more maybe a 15 to 30 minute type of conversation or less. So I just put this slide up here. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but just to kind of break down what the time commitment looks like. As you can see, that first week of August, we offer an evening and daytime orientation training. And then again, you can see here on August 8th, we assign the applications 3 weeks to review. And then we have these various interview meetings and selection meetings. And then the next thing I wanted to highlight is the support and training offered. So again, this is the first time we've done this in a really comprehensive way. And so we'll provide the community reviewer orientation and training. We'll also offer informal check-ins, just kind of, hey, how's it going? Do you need anything? We definitely will have an open door for any questions or concerns. And again, we expect to learn. We expect that the community reviewers will think of things we haven't thought of and will need to work to make sure that we can address what those things might be, or if we can't maybe resolve an issue or answer a question, we can at least flag it to improve for future community reviewer processes. So for those of you that are willing to apply and enter into this process, we really appreciate you and your willingness to help us figure this out together. So next, I just wanted to talk through the application process itself and break it down and what the selection process for community reviewers will look like. You'll notice some similarities with the Capacity Building Grant Program. So I just kind of highlighted a few things. So one, read through the community reviewer overview and application that's available on the website. It's linked here in the application, or excuse me, the presentation as well. It just goes into more detail about why we're doing this, what the priorities are, what the timelines are, some of the contracting details, timelines. It just helps you kind of know the background. So when you're answering the questions, hopefully it'll help you highlight your strengths. It's an online application. It's linked here and also on the website. So when you first link to it, you'll see, again, as a government agency, we have to explain what we'll do with the data. So we have that explanation, and then you hit the start button to begin. It's a pretty short application. It asks for your name, your contact information, optional demographic information, and then there's 4 yes/no questions. So you just say yes or no to the various answers about ability to participate. And then 2 questions where you can provide more explanation about why you're interested in being a community reviewer and the expertise, perspective, and values you hope to bring. You'll click finish to submit your application. And I should note, we're seeking about 11 community reviewers and then an additional 5 reviewers that have worked on activities funded by previous capacity building grants. If you have worked on one of those, there'll be a yes/no question. And if you have worked on it, say yes. And there's 2 more questions where you can provide a little more detail about the grant you worked on and your experience. And then just a few application tips. Again, really want to emphasize taking the time to read that overview and application. It really helps kind of give a framework for help you prepare as you're going to submit the application. Again, it's a pretty short application, but it's always a good idea to start early and allow enough time. And then, assume that the only information we have is what you've provided in your application. You may know other Minnesota housing staff or have worked with us on other efforts that we've had, but again, just assume the only things we know are what's been provided. Please make sure to directly answer the question, be clear and concise. And then also closely monitor your email address. If there's any issues after the application, we may need to reach out. And also we'll be emailing as well to let you know if you've been selected for an interview. We'll try to reach you with some of the other alternate contact information, but again, if you can, to just keep an eye on your email address after you apply. And another thing, we really do emphasize the importance of including community members that have directly experienced housing challenges. It's, the folks for whom the system isn't working really are best positioned to understand why it's not working. That being said, we're not looking for you to provide a lot of really personal information or have to kind of relive traumas related to housing challenges. Only provide the information that you're comfortable sharing and that you think kind of helps explain why you're excited to be a community reviewer. So Now we wanted to talk through the selection process. As with anything government, right, we have to have a clear and transparent process. So we do have a scoring process that's really focused on the applicant's readiness to participate, that they demonstrate that they have a passion and interest in participating. Maybe they're really passionate about housing justice, about thriving communities, whatever you want to say in your own words. But again, looking for that passion and interest in being part of this process. We'll select the interview candidates based on a review of application scores. We'll we'll invite the selected candidates for interviews on July 21st. Again, like a late afternoon, evening options are available. And then Friday, July 22nd, between 9 and 1. It'll be a 15-minute interview. And again, we'll notify you that afternoon of July 15th and provide more details about the process. As I mentioned earlier, we aim to select 11 community reviewers and then 5 reviewers with experience on previous capacity building grants. We'll notify you if you've been selected on July 25th. And then a few more things, again, as with any state agency, we have a lot of rules around contracting, confidentiality, and conflict of interest. Just kind of want to break it down a little bit. So by Monday, August 1st, if you've been selected, we'll provide you with a contract, and we'd ask that it be signed and returned to us by Monday, August 1st. We'll also that you complete and provide a form W-9, which requires a social security number or an individual tax identification number for payment information. So the payment will be made via a check. We're still looking into if we can do direct deposit, but we just wanted to kind of explain the format of that payment. We will provide information and kind of instructions for how to fill this out. We'll also have an optional kind of Q&A session for those that have been selected. It's not legal advice, but at least we want to kind of break it down and hopefully demystify it a bit. And then the other 2 big pieces to keep in mind if you want to be part of this process is one, please take confidentiality very seriously. We cannot share applicant information during the selection process. And also, this is still going to be a remote process, at least at this time. So make sure when you're joining trainings, meetings, interviews, that you're in a private location where you can't be overheard. The other important piece is identifying any conflicts of interest. So if your employer ends up applying for the 2020 Capacity Building Grant, you won't unfortunately be able to serve as a community reviewer. The other conflicts of interest, and again, we'll provide more details, but could be things like your personal connection to one of the grant applicants or your family member's connection to one of the grant applicants. Again, we'll go into more detail, but this is just part of having a fair and transparent process and making sure we avoid actual or the appearance of kind of favoritism in the grant process. And so finally, this is the last section. Thanks for hanging in there. I just wanted to talk about the grant itself. So this is the grant that community reviewers will be assigned to review. It's $1.45 million total for 2-year grant periods. The actual awards to individual grantees will vary. And there's 2 uses for this grant. So one is organizational capacity building, and that's where the grantee will use the funds to build its own capacity and its own ability to address root causes of housing challenges and housing disparity, build power in communities most impacted by housing challenges and disparities, pilot innovative solutions, and support inclusive and equitable communities. The other use for this grant is what we call intermediary capacity building. So that's where the grantee has a set of expertise and relationships that it will use to build the capacity of others through things like pass-through grants or technical assistance. And again, that's just that technical information and education to help communities, stakeholders, and organizations develop their capacity in things like housing planning, community development, and community engagement. I won't go into a lot of detail here, but just it's intentionally broad because we are looking to the expertise of community organizations to identify what the need is and what the innovative solutions or activities might be. But some examples could be, creative solutions to housing challenges, community engagement and leadership, building so that communities can really take the lead in decision-making processes, building partnerships, to have better alignment towards advancing equity and addressing housing needs. And then for the intermediary capacity building, again, just a few examples. It could be providing technical assistance such as specific information or expertise to community-based organizations so that they can engage in housing development and planning activities, pass through grants so that the organizations can hire consultants and things like that. So that is kind of a big overview. I know I've shared a lot of information, so I wanted to turn it back to all of you for questions. And I might look to some of my team members here to answer questions as needed. All right, thank you so much. Are there any questions in the chat, or feel free to share?
So, hi, I'm Tyrus, and I was having some connection issues in the beginning, so I wasn't able to introduce myself to the group. My name is Tyrus, and I'm with Al Moon, which is a nonprofit organization here in the North Minneapolis area. And one of the questions, because I found out about this meeting pretty late, and I want to make sure that I'm able to receive the recording. Because as things were kind of cutting in and out, I missed chunks of what was being said.
Great question. So yes, the recording is going to be, or this meeting has been recorded. It'll be posted online. I'll put it in the chat, but we can also, yeah, I'll put it in the chat for now, but we can also follow up after as well.
Okay.
Good question.
Alyssa, it looks like we have a question here in the chat asking if the orientation sessions will be recorded if someone is out of town.
Oh, so the orientation sessions will not be able to be recorded. We needed to make sure there's an opportunity to have that in-person conversation to help kick off the process. I see a question about a low-high total number of grants awarded for capacity building. That will definitely vary. I know I have the numbers available. I just need to look that up for a second. And then I'll pause to see if there's any other questions. And again, in the chat, you can see the link to the community reviewer webpage. That's where the recording will be available. And I should say, if any of my other coworkers want to chime in, or if I misspoke as I was talking on the fly, by all means, feel free to make any corrections now.
All right. I'm sorry, but I don't see the you said the meeting is will be posted in the chat where we can find the
Oh, the link to where it will be posted. So once we wrap up the meeting, we'll send it to our tech team. It might take 24 hours to upload, but this just the webpage for the community reviewer grant program is where you can find the recording. So again, it might be up there tomorrow, maybe Thursday. Oh, and I do have the numbers. So for as I mentioned, there's two uses, so the organizational or intermediary. We anticipate between 17 to 32 grantees will be selected for the organizational capacity building, and then 6 to 15 for the intermediary capacity building grantees. So there's a question, if you can't attend the orientation, is that the end of the road? Again, the intention is that we can all do the training together. We may have to consider if it's screening out a lot of applicants, we may need to give it a second thought. I think just the significant thing is a lot of the meetings can't be moved at this point. But I will leave it to some of, if any of my other coworkers want to weigh in about that piece, feel free.
Melissa, are we able to provide them with the flyer that we created for if they have others that may not have been able to attend today? To have more information about this process, are we able to provide that for them? Or post it on the website or something?
Oh, sure, that's a good idea, Cheryl. I think we could, yeah, I don't think it's posted to the website now. But yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
And then, good one. Thanks, Cheryl. And then there's a question about sharing general information about the scope of the grant, such as unsheltered homeless, mental health, addiction. So the grants have varied quite a bit in the past. They've ranged from, for example, supporting the leadership development of people that have experienced homelessness, to provide some information about the affordable housing development industry so that they could provide technical expertise about an affordable housing development that was being built intended for them. There's been grants related to building out housing models for people exiting incarceration, listening to people that have experienced incarceration for the types of housing they might need. There's been grants related to motivational interviewing, which is kind of a strength-based interviewing for county service providers so that they're supporting people needing to find housing. It really is a pretty broad use, but again, always with a focus on how is it centering people that have directly experienced housing challenges and disparities, and how is it building that leadership. So it is very broad. Any other questions?
So there will be 11 people selected as reviewers, correct?
That's right. Yep.
And-
And then around 5 of previous grantees or staff that have worked on the grant in the past. There might be kind of overlap in terms of, you know, also having a direct connection with housing challenges. So yeah.
And maybe I missed this, maybe you said it, the criteria for the selection, for selecting the 11.
Oh, good question. Yep. So it's really looking at prioritizing applicants that have shown just a passion for wanting to address housing challenges, for wanting to get involved in decision making. So really, that's really the main criteria. And then the other pieces are more general availability to attend the meetings, to complete the work, those types of questions.
And by any chance, do you know how many applicants that you have so far?
So we don't know yet. The deadline is July 13th. So I think we just wait until we receive the application. So I'm not sure at this point. And then I saw a question about, is this grant tied into existing grant funds such as the state opioid grant and sheltered homeless in general? No, this is a separate grant offered by Minnesota Housing. Thanks for the comment. Someone said, thank you. It's a great opportunity for peer and community input. Let's see. So I'll just wait a couple more minutes. Thank you so much for your taking the time to learn more about the grant, to ask these great questions. Any updates will be made to that website that I just put in the chat. So again, we'll be uploading the recording. If there's any other changes based on some of the feedback we get, we may make some changes, can't promise yet. And then we'll also upload the PDF that Cheryl referenced, which is like a handout that you could share with your contacts. So with that, I don't, let's see, I think one more question is coming. Oh, just a comment. Thank you so much. So I'll just stay on the line for a bit. But welcome, y'all welcome to wrap up and go on with your day if you've had your questions answered. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna hold fast.
Oh yeah, that's no problem. Thanks again for joining, and you asked really good questions. I feel like zipping through a PowerPoint, it's easy to kind of not dig into everything. So thanks for that.
No, not a problem.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Hi, I have a quick question. So there are going to be 11 reviewers. What happens if there's a conflict of interest? Do you have backup?
Yeah, so if there's a conflict of interest, we haven't enough. We'll do our best to kind of separate. There's a few different selection meetings, so we could keep a reviewer out of one selection process and put them in the other. If we can't resolve those conflicts of interest, then the community reviewer can't move forward. I know I've been thinking through kind of, do we have kind of a backup list in case that happens?
Alyssa, I think it might also be important to note that there will be state staff on the review committee as well, that the 11 reviewers and the 5 additional community previous capacity will be a part of a team of reviewers, not the only reviewers.
Good point. Good point, Kim. I think we often have about maybe 30 or so reviewers for these grants. So again, it'll be a group effort. Like someone listed as James has their hand up.
Hi, yeah, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Pretty good. I was just wondering if I qualified for the application, as I have been in one of the programs. I don't know if it's exactly what you guys have funded, but one of the homeless projects, one of the newer ones this last year, or last couple of years.
Yeah, so the so any experience with state housing programs is really helpful. We don't require it. It's really we have kind of an open question saying, you know, how is your experience with housing challenges? How will that inform who you know, what perspectives you're bringing into the grant process? So it's less about necessarily having formal experience with a state-run housing program, and more about, you know, if you've experienced housing challenges, how does that shape your perspective and enrich the selection process overall?
Okay, all right. All right, thank you. You answered my question.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks. Right.
The deadline again for the application is
Wednesday, July 13th at 2 p.m.
And just to kind of piggyback off of James' question, so I've worked with a different nonprofit organization that was mainly focused on re-entry, and within that there's a housing component. So that type of experiences, so it would be a kind of indirect. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, would that be like indirect versus actually working for housing? An organization that's directly providing housing services or help with housing?
Yeah, so there's no kind of like work experience requirement. You don't have to have worked with an organization that provides housing or anything like that. It's more, I don't know if I'm saying this right, my coworkers can correct me, but this idea of like, you know, how experiencing housing challenges really helps say, okay, this doesn't work in the system, that doesn't work in the system. Because when we're reviewing these grants, it's all about addressing root causes. And so we want to pick grantees that are really prioritizing moving the needle when it comes to addressing root causes and thriving communities. So I know I'm not being really specific, but honestly, it's really broad. It's more like just general experience with housing, right? Like living in a house, getting a house, being denied housing, struggling to afford your housing. Like those are all really broad examples, but just kind of different examples of what we mean when we say experiencing housing challenges. So it doesn't necessarily mean work experience, but sort of broadly.
And you said earlier, I think there was like 1 point some million. I didn't catch the whole figure, and that money would kind of be allocated to different initiatives. Did I understand that correct? So it's like
Yes. Yep. So it's 1.45 million for the grant program that the community reviewers will be scoring. So it's 1.45 million total, and it'll be more is for the organizational capacity building than the intermediary use. But yeah, those are the funds available, and they're for 2-year grants.
2-year grants.
Do you want me? I can put the link. I don't know if I put things in the chat, but I know this doesn't work for everybody. I can put the link to that grant program in the chat as well.
Okay. Let's see if I can see it.
There you go.
I'm not seeing much. Maybe there's an issue I have with the chat.
There's a little bubble. Otherwise, did you get
Yeah,
this?
but for some reason it's not really like updating for me. Then
Oh,
you just
shoot.
froze. So I don't even know if you still hear me.
No, I can hear you. I'm sorry about that. The other thing is if you go to www.mnhousing.gov, right on the front page under special announcements, we've announced this, so you can also link to it there. So I'm sorry. So
Okay, there it is. No, you like my screen. I'm having really bad connection issues. This is my first time using this space that I'm in, so I had no idea I was going to have these type of problems. I missed just about everything that you said, but I do see the link now. And at first, it didn't seem like my chat stream was actually updating. If you could kind of repeat yourself so I understand what the link.
Of course.
I
was just, oh, please don't apologize. It happens to all of us. So I was going to say, if it doesn't show up in the chat, if you go to mnhousing.gov, it's right in the special announcement section on our front page. So if for some reason the chat didn't work, I was going to say you could just do mnhousing.gov, and then there's a link on the front page. And James, I see your hand is up. Do you have another question?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. I don't know why. I don't know how to get it out there.
No worries. At the end, everyone's hands are up. Great. Well, any other questions? Thanks again for the great questions and for your interest.
Thank you. Great presentation. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. No patience was needed. Don't worry about it. Thanks for all the good questions.
All right. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. If you're interested, make sure to apply.
Will do. Very interesting. Thanks.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Alyssa.
Good idea, Cheryl, by the way. Thanks. Bye.